But I want to welcome everybody to what I refer to as the longest session title I've ever seen at a VMworld. But what we're going to talk about today is I have Jason Miller here from Rapid City Regional Health, and we did some work with them around leveraging microsegmentation and leveraging using NSX to secure their new Epic EMR environment. So my name is Jeff Wilmington. I'm a technical product manager within the NSBU. I'm going to skip the disclaimer. We're not going to be talking about anything that you technically can't tweet about because you're going to get the slide decks when we're done. But I'm Jeff Wilmington. I'm a technical product manager within the networking and security business unit. I'm focused on the security side of networking and security. As I started at VMware, I was a core SE focused on healthcare accounts in Illinois. And then I joined the networking and security business unit as an NSX specialist, helping our customers go through microsegmentation and leveraging NSX as a platform, specifically for healthcare customers. So that's where Jason and I met, and we kind of started down this process. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Jason Miller. So I am currently, as I am new, the Director of Infrastructure Technology at Regional Health. And I met Jeff, it was probably a good year ago now, and on our journey to implement Epic, we're a Meditech customer. I'll get more into that later. We just really felt it was time to button up security on a newly minted system, especially our bread and butter of EHR. So had a great opportunity to move forward with NSX, and with that, I'll give it back to you, Jeff.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm only going to talk for maybe 15 or 20 minutes or so, and we're going to leave the rest here for Jason because I really want him to go through what they experienced as a customer side and give you folks kind of the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty kind of what things are going on, right? So I'm going to take you a little bit through the reason why, talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in terms of NSX and Epic as a system, and how we're helping secure patient data. So the reason why we're kind of going down this path, right, is around the number of breaches that have been happening within healthcare organizations and the amount of fines that are now being told on healthcare organizations as the data is basically exfiltrated from those systems. And there has been a study by Ponemon Institute in 2016 that was functionally saying that healthcare records are functionally around about $355 a piece on the black market, which is a significantly higher cost than, say, your credit card information, because the information that you can get from PHI and PII data is significantly more lucrative for them to go through, and that healthcare systems have never been more challenged with creating and dealing with these security threats than they are today. So, as an organization, VMware, we sat down and had a discussion about where can we provide the most value for healthcare organizations. And so the problem statement and the business goal of what we're trying to accomplish here with NSX for healthcare organizations is, how do I take the absolute number one business critical application for a hospital system and provide a scalable, least privilege security posture to perform layered security around the most business critical application within that environment to help contain and protect the data within. So that brings us to NSX, microsegmentation, and what we're doing with Epic as an electronic medical record system. So just a little bit around NSX as a platform. NSX currently supports 9 or so, probably a little bit more than that, basic use cases here. Obviously, we're going to be focusing on this intersection, but this is just kind of to give you an idea of the other types of things that we're doing with the NSX platform. As we sit down and talk about the microsegmentation benefits, so with NSX as a platform, what we're functionally doing is we're placing security at the VM level to control how traffic is distributed between systems within the data center. We're focused on east-west traffic within our data centers. Our north-south perimeter firewalls that we typically have large appliances for are really great about handling the north-south traffic. But once you're inside your data center, typically your virtual machines have unfettered access to have communications with each other. We have virtual machines that are allowed to talk to each other even though they're not necessarily should have access to communicate with each other. So without NSX, there could possibly be lots of unnecessary communications or the potential for unnecessary communications between those virtual machines. With NSX, what we're doing is we're placing a stateful firewall at every one of our virtual machines. And with that stateful firewall, we can now control how the machine on the left can talk to the machine on the right. We can say that this machine should only talk over port 443 or port 1366 or 1433 for SQL or whatever is necessary for that system to actually communicate. The way that we're doing this is as we place that at the firewall, we're going through and creating this posture of least privilege, right? So we're saying that from a network perspective, we're only going to allow the specific traffic. From microsegmentation design principles and least privilege design principles, it's about isolation and segmentation. If I can, within software and within NSX, I can actually control how systems communicate with each other, and I can actually say that systems can't talk to each other. Things that are very difficult to do within a physical world that would need lots of physical firewalls based on however many applications you have in your system. It becomes very operationally infeasible to kind of do those things. The other design principle is around least privilege, right? So least privilege meaning only allow what's necessary and block everything else. The last piece is, thanks Jeff, you put a whole bunch of firewalls at every one of my virtual machines. That's great, but how do I control this, right? So how do I actually control how my systems talk to each other? If I have 1,000 virtual machines in my data center and I have 1,000 firewalls to manage, how do I manage that? With NSX, the control center is within the NSX manager. I have full control over all of the firewalls within my data center on all my virtual machines. So let's take a look at Epic here. And folks that are familiar with Epic know that Epic is not necessarily just one system, one application, right? It is composed of multiple applications. And I don't want to say necessarily that it's complex because I don't really think that it's complex, but there are lots of moving parts to this. So as our customers try to basically get their hands around Epic, deploying Epic, even within their own environment and actually leveraging it as an application. If you wanted to go down the path of actually securing this application, providing that least privilege boundary around this application, it becomes very difficult because we have several applications that we have to think about that actually make up the system. We're not saying that Epic is inherently insecure, but we're saying if we want a least privilege model to only allow the communications from the hyperspace web servers to the cache database, then for us to be able to do that, we need to know what ports and protocols to open and close. So what we did as an organization at VMware is we decided to, how do we, wrangle necessarily this application, right? So as we sat down, we took all of the information that we know about Epic, we took all of the objects that sit within Epic, and we created a blueprint specifically to secure Epic. It is a blueprint that you inject into Service Composer, and you can immediately start tagging your virtual machines and placing them per the application within the policies. Every one of these security rules for how the systems talk to each other is already in place. There is no need for a customer to go out and have to understand or try to figure these things out. We have worked with Epic, together with Epic, to basically say, we now have a 80%, 85% view of what a typical Epic deployment looks like, and we have rules in place to secure those portions of that system. The other 20 to 15 to 20% are customer-specific ports, right? Mm-hmm. You can actually go through and change your cache data port. It doesn't have to be 9,000 or 6,000. A customer can actually pick those. We know that. We call those things out. We put a default port in place. All you have to do as a customer is change the port number to the one that matches yours, and every rule is immediately updated to match your environment. If we were, this is basically a picture that comes out of the data flow document that Epic gives out to their customers. So this is not necessarily, NDA-based types of things, but this is the kind of system that we're talking about from this perspective, right? There's lots of moving parts. If you were to go through and actually attempt to do microsegmentation with physical equipment, this is what it would look like. I have to now layer a bunch of firewalls in place to actually make this work, right? Physical firewalls, operationally infeasible. Every one of these firewalls, I would then have to go in and change my rule sets and do everything I would need to do to allow communications. It's cost prohibitive. Every one of those pieces of hardware firewalls, they cost a lot of money, right? A firewall these days is anywhere between 50 to 100 grand, depending upon which kind you buy. Mm-hmm. It's also extremely brittle. We all know that Epic as an application, every new version continues to get a little bit bigger, right? They ask for 20 to 30% more hardware and software as we continue to grow. So if these systems continue to expand and you continue to add more virtual machines to your environment, I now have to go back to every one of my physical firewalls to actually make all of these things work, right? And and from a patient care application, downtime is just not acceptable. So what we did was we took all those objects, all of those things, and we said, can we take this down from the hours it took us to build it and the hours it would take for a customer to go through and figure out all the flows and so forth to do least privilege around the system? Can we take it from hours to days or minutes? We took all of those objects, created all those firewall rules, and shoved them into a nice blueprint that a customer can now inject into their system, tag the virtual machines with the appropriate systems that make up the different components of Epic, figure out the last 15 to 20% of your customer types of ports and protocols, and you're up and running very, very quickly. I would say that working on building this blueprint, I've spent well over 250 to 300 hours vetting with customers, working on the blueprint. The concept was, how do I not make my customers have to do that? Okay? This is functionally what we did with the application. We split the application up into 4 segments, right? We said we're going to do presentation and reporting, service and database. All of the different components of Epic, we split them out. So the nice thing about this blueprint is that a customer doesn't have to consume it all in one bite. You don't have to eat the entire elephant, right? You can go through and segment your presentation layer, your reporting tiers, your Kogodos, your clarities. You can do those tiers if you want. And you don't necessarily have to do the entire thing. As we talked with Jason here, they went through the process of actually doing all of it, and they were able to do it very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. Last thing here as I go through, just before we wrap up, is this is how we're building the security policy for how we're doing the rule sets for this system in the blueprint. We're taking a security tag, and we obviously, folks familiar with Epic will know what Kuiper is. We are taking a security tag for Kuiper. We are tagging the virtual machine with the security tag. That tag is then going to place the Kuiper virtual machine into an NSX-based security group. That security group will then be leveraged by the security policy that's specific for Kuiper to allow access to the servers it needs access to. We're going to take the services, the ports and the protocols. We built custom services. We named them so that when customers look at them, they know what the services are and what they belong to. We placed them into a group of services, and we applied those to the security blueprint. This is what we get out of it. We get firewall rules that say, if I'm going to allow communications between my Hyperspace web servers to my Kuiper server or Kuiper to Hyperspace web, we're only going to allow these ports and protocols, and we're going to apply these rules here. This is a screenshot from the exact example of the section from Kuiper that basically shows all the rule sets that are necessary to go through and do that. Does this make sense? Does this resonate with folks? This is what we're trying to do. I don't want customers to have to go out and figure this stuff out. And I also don't want you to have to, what I refer to as, and I've been on the customer side, I've only been at VMware for 2.5 years, but I've lived on the customer side for 15 years, the death of 1,000 cuts, right? How many times do I bring something new in the environment and can have to continue to make modifications until it actually continues to work? That's the premise of why we built it. That is the premise of why we want to make sure our customers are secure from the start. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason so he can kind of tell you how they went, how Regional Health went through their journey.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
First of all, I got to ask, how many of you guys, I'm assuming, how many of you are in healthcare? Okay, figured most all of you. I don't know, but today's presentation in the morning session just reminded me again why I'm so happy to be in healthcare and why, as IT, I think we often forget sometimes what we're doing. I mean, we are IT, but man, just looking what they're doing with patient care and the different things in technology, I thought that was pretty amazing. So again, Jason Miller, Regional Health, and like Jeff said, I can tell you right now as a customer, one of the first things when we started looking at doing NSX, 2 years ago I was at VMworld and heard about this and thought, this is amazing. This is going to hit a lot of our security needs. And then I started thinking about, what are we going to have to do to actually make this thing work with our EHR systems? And I just kind of started to twitch a little bit. So what Jeff was talking about, and where I'm going to go here in a minute, I can really be a firsthand example of how impressive the work that Jeff did and his team and where they got it. So this is the cursory building shot of the hospital that our marketing team asked us to put in here. So that's what we look like. So we're in western South Dakota. Our mission, as you can see, is we're committing to help patients in our communities live well. We service about a 200-mile radius in what people like to call the flyover country. We've got quite a few services that we provide. We have 5 hospitals, 24 clinics, and 5,000 caregivers and physicians. We are a nonprofit system, and so really our mission is to help anybody regardless of their mission to pay. Kind of from a technology standpoint, we currently we're Meditech EHR is where we're at. We're at 5.6. 2 years ago, yes, 2 years ago, we made the decision, we didn't start, but we made the decision to move to Epic. So I don't know, we're a little bit crazy in that sense. We're actually going live here in less than 2 months. Yeah, right? So we're a little bit nuts on that, but it's working out. We decided to go the 100% virtualized track. That means we decided to virtualize cache using Red Hat, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's been a fantastic decision. We're very happy about how that's worked out. We have also went a little bit against the recommendation of Epic. We've went with Horizon View and done virtual desktops. We've done that with Imprivata, and we've also integrated a tap and print system, which they've really not been excited about. We've proven them wrong so far, so we're pretty excited about that. The overall environment, as you can see there, we won't go into a lot of the nitty-gritty, but we've been working really hard to virtualize our environment and do so with VMware, and they've been a great partner with us. So why did we choose NSX? There's a lot of simple reasons here, but I think from a cost standpoint, I think the question is always we need more security, especially in healthcare. But as healthcare is continually seeing attacks on us from all different kinds of directions, it's pretty obvious that our traditional tools just aren't there anymore. We've got Cisco AMP and all those kind of, I like to call that its own malware in its own right, if you've ever used it. But your antiviruses, all those different things, they're great. Even we use Bitdefender on our virtual machines at a host level, that works great. That still doesn't protect you against what I like to see, and that is just focusing on less access. I would also tell you that if you're a network guy, your traditional VLAN segmentation, as a matter of fact, before we started looking at NSX, we had the network guys sit in a room and tell us how they were going to create what they called the Death Star of security and how they're going to just keep segmenting down all the different networks. But that was from a physical standpoint. And We're talking about all these IP changes and all this craziness, and my eyes started to roll back in my head, and I even like the network guys. So it was just a little bit tricky. Again, physical, like Jeff obviously talked about, all these different firewalls, that's great, but the cost, the hardware, just how long it takes for them to become obsolete, and then looking at just how static those things are, it was also just a nightmare from the networking standpoint too. So to us, it just made sense. We started talking about east-west traffic, and that, to us, especially from the security guys, they're just nodding their heads, yep. I mean, we talk about from a simple perspective of why does every PC have to talk to each PC in the entire organization? That's just a massive footprint for horizontal attacks and different things. So we discussed from that perspective, wow, we really got to get this integrated into our EHR if we're going to do this right away. We're super excited with how integrated NSX was with vSphere and the whole environment. It pretty much just plugs in. There's not a whole lot of other management consoles you have. I mean, there are some, but just that integration was really slick. So here, the other piece was just how extensible it was. I mean, we could go from this pocket here, move on to another segment, just starting adding pieces, and it was all software driven, as you well know with NSX. That to us was just super, innovative in terms of looking at networking from a different standpoint and how we could do security that way. From a network guys, we'll talk more about it, but they're touting their Palo Altos and their Cisco ASAs and all that kind of good stuff, and those are all excellent tools, but we started to look at how those third parties could actually co-join and be a partner with NSX instead of being a competing technology, and really how you have your different layers of security and how those tools really complement what we're doing with NSX. The other part that I thought was really slick was just the advanced characterization for defined rule sets. It's not just ports and everything. I think Jeff could probably help me on this one, but you could look at different data flows and different data patterns and really start to customize what you want to do, and it can be really dynamic. You could have a server, and if you start watching that data and you see that it's SQL type traffic, you can automatically start to protect that environment just upon the SQL traffic. Yep. So those kind of things were really game changers for us, because now we're not having to have someone who's always just watching. It's dynamic, just like we've come to learn and love with virtualization. The same thing with NSX. Those rules, those things can be extremely dynamic in how you set them up. I kind of gave some examples up there of how you can do it. But the number one reason, which Jeff already alluded to, man, when we're trying to go live with Epic, the last thing that we're trying to think about is how can we go out there and analyze all these different ports from all these different services within Epic. That was the last thing on our mind. We loved the concept. We loved the idea. We knew we just didn't have the time until Jeff showed up at my doorstep. He's like, we've already done that for you. No, you haven't done this. Really? You've done this? And he's like, yeah, we've done it. So the fact that they got together and created the blueprint really kind of helped with kind of that statement right there. I like to throw out those classic movie comments. So here's what I can tell you. Jeff's already talked about it a lot, so I'm not going to go super in-depth here as to what is microsegmentation, but to us, it really was isolating, right? We could isolate that traffic. That really helped out. Segmentation, we could still segment, just like the network guys wanted to segment, so that was pretty cool. Let's see, segmentation with advanced services, which I kind of talked about already, about that dynamic policy and rule sets that you can do. We like the benefits of the network security inside the data center. So much of firewall right now is it's kind of like your moat around the castle. But if anybody penetrates that moat, next thing you know, you're in, you got all this stuff. And that's how our server network was designed. We had a VLAN for the servers. Well, it's like, great. But once you get inside, it was pretty much wild, wild west. You could get whatever access you wanted to. We kind of VLAN segmented off radiology and maybe a few other concerned workloads, our PCI networks, things like that. But outside of that, it was really wide open. So now having this kind of security from east to west and protecting those different workloads was really slick.
Jason,
yes.
On the isolation side of things, might educate them a little bit more on your prod and non-prod environments from an Epic perspective, because I think that was something that we started looking at too from an isolation standpoint.
I was definitely going to hit that. So yes, absolutely.
I scooped you.
That's okay. I like that. Just here to keep me honest. So let's see here. And again, I kind of talked about that already, the integration and the automation. Let's see here. So the blueprint. Like Jeff said, they teamed up and developed the base policy and rule set for the whole thing, for whole Epic Care. I was just floored. I didn't think that they would have been able to do that, but I kind of talk it down here that the adoption, well, it was easy for me in my position to go to our leadership and our CIO and say, look, they've already worked with Epic. It's not like they come in and just kind of did this on their own. This is something they partnered with Epic in doing. And so when I was talking to the CIO about it, that was their concern was, well, okay, but how baked is this? How legitimate is this? Is this something that we're going to put in and it's not going to be really all that fine-tuned? And after I kind of explained that Epic's eating their own dog food with VMware on this, it was like a no-brainer. They were ready to see it. Time saving, Jeff said it. He already invested the 300 plus hours into it. I'll tell you here pretty soon how much time we spent on it, which was far from that. It was very slick. So, they brought the blueprint, and that made it super easy to move forward. So that was all good and well, but as technology people, we want to see this thing, right? We want to see how hard is this. So we did. We wanted a proof of concept, and it really was that easy. I mean, they showed up, I think, 2 days. Proof of concept was in and done. And I remember one of my senior engineers coming to me and was like, we're done. I'm like, you're done? It's like, yeah, we're done. It's 2 days. We're trying to find some things to do with the rest of our time here today. And it's like, okay, great. I'm like, but is it working? Like, done working? He's like, yeah, it's working. It's like, okay, wow. So it was really fast to install the basic pieces and parts of NSX. That was simple. What we'll get to into a minute is kind of the more of the work that Jeff kind of talked about. But it was really easy. Obviously, the cost of NSX, I'm going to be upfront, it's not inexpensive. But I can tell you from the cost for what we spend on other security products, this was money well invested. So we definitely wanted to see what it looked like. When it comes to Epic, how many of you guys implemented Epic? Okay, and I'm going to get to this whole test thing in a minute. But as you well know, when you're implementing Epic, the last thing you want to do is you want to interrupt your build team. That's like the first sin. Those guys are going, for us, we were surprised during this whole process of build because when we wanted to take a downtime, you would have thought we were in production already. We were taking, downtimes at like 10:30 at night because the build team's still working at 10 o'clock at night. So for us, it was kind of this weird thing, and we didn't want to interrupt them, but figuring out we could do this really helped out. Let's see here. I guess I can look at my slides here. That would probably help. Sorry. The whole thing, how did it go? Well, I got to tell you, so amazingly simple, like I said. The network team pretty much did love it. We'll get into that a little bit more, but I was pleasantly shocked at how well they received it after we kind of went through. We had Jeff come out a couple of times. I think he kind of was the network whisperer, kind of talked them off the ledge a little bit, helped them understand really what they were going to get into and how much value it really would bring to them. You do got to be ready for what your architecture of vSphere looks like, though, because in our case, we needed to have 2 vCenters, and we had a reason for that, and that does affect how you implement NSX a little bit. Not a bad thing, it just does. And I can tell you probably the most important piece to NSX as a complement is your log insight. That is where you get like an open book of what is going on between the communications between your servers, and that is like the fast track to helping you with NSX and get things going. Do you want to add anything to that, Jeff?
That's what we use to verify a lot of the things.
Yeah.
You use your network insight customer as well, which has been very, very helpful in terms of doing other things as well.
Very, very helpful. And I'll even talk about log insight a little bit more here in a second. Okay, so we talked so much about NSX and the benefits of NSX. We'd been to VMworld, 2 or 3 years and heard all about it, and we just always thought it'd be this pie in the sky thing. And then we actually got to the point of doing the POC and realizing that this was something we could actually do, and I was very surprised. So in terms of the PSO, I can tell you that they were amazing. So I'll be up front right now. We didn't get Jeff for the PSO because Jeff went on to do bigger and better things. And by the way, I'm going to give a shameless plug for Jeff. He just finished writing a book, Day 2 Operations for your NSX. And I'm excited to get a copy of that sometime. So nice job, Jeff.
Thank you.
Yeah. So But even not having Jeff there, we definitely had some extremely talented people from VMware come out. Anytime you hear about services, you get pretty concerned about cost. I was impressed. They went off billable hours, which at first I was a little bit nervous about. But really, we scoped that engagement for our organization. So I'm just going to be upfront with that, with a brand new organization, or not brand new organization, but brand new Epic installation. They were there for 3 weeks. The first week was really getting just NSX up and going in its native state. And then the next 2 weeks were really going through and making sure that the build rules that Jeff and his team worked on so hard, that they were in place and working with both of our environments, not only our test environment, but our prod environment. So in terms of our engineers, so what we really decided on with the networking team is they're the widget builders. They're the ones who go in and create the policies. They're the ones who go in and do all the things that they're used to in terms of firewalling. And then in terms of the VMware team, what we do is we just use them. We used to always have them do VLAN tagging, all that kind of good things. Really, that's what mattered to us. And so the VMware guys, the server engineers, they're like, okay, just business as usual. We just got the policies and we set the policy. Security team, really, when they heard about this, they'd already heard about NSX. They'd read their trade blogs, all those kind of good things. They were excited. They asked a few questions. They kind of wanted to know how they could get logs out of it for their SIM, and that was pretty much about it, and stamped their approval, and we moved on. I kind of already told you about executive leadership and strategy in terms of security. If you don't have a strategy for security at your organization right now, you'll be getting one very soon. I can guarantee you that. It's really come to the forefront in our organization. As a matter of fact, as I was getting ready to leave for VMworld, I think we used Proofpoint, and we had a big, massive spam attack on us. And so, they're really starting to hit hard against healthcare systems, as Jeff mentioned. So that wasn't too hard. So why did we do Epic first? Well, obviously it was a greenfield for us. But we also thought, PHI is our most protected asset. You look at a bank and all these other organizations, whether it's intellectual property, patient health information is our asset that we have to protect. And we thought, hey, we're putting in a new EHR, we're going Epic, why not start out of the gate with the right tools and the right set of things to secure us? We started with prod, and you're probably wondering why. Well, in the Epic build process, they are in tests, and they are just living in that thing. So we were really concerned about going forward with tests. And so what we did is we were in the process of building prod. So we went forward and just put all the rules into prod, made sure that we felt it worked from basically a systems engineering standpoint. Then once we got all those rules in place, then we kind of had some of the team from the build team go in and start poking around a little bit, making sure workflows were working right. One of the big ones that was a little bit challenging for us was interconnect, because interconnect is like doing all the things in one box kind of thing. All the ports from everywhere and all over. And we're like, wow, hey, this was easy and it worked. And as a matter of fact, we kind of got people in, started working. After that, and when we validated those things worked, then we moved on to test. And it wasn't too difficult to move to test. A few ports were different, but the policies were pretty much exactly the same. So we just moved it right over to the other environment and we lit it up. And I'll come back in a few minutes with some of the things we learned from that experience and where we kind of tripped over ourselves. It wasn't NSX's fault. But point being is it really worked out for us to start with prod and move forward in the test. And so really when we walk into go live, as a matter of fact, they're living in NSX world right now. So it's been very, very easy and very straightforward. So our next plan is to basically start picking off more line of business applications. And we'll start through different budget cycles, adding more NSX licensing and moving forward with these different policies. With Jeff's team and PSO, we've already learned how to use Log Insight and study this traffic. So to be honest, we've already kind of started looking at the next things, and it has not been a hard thing to do. It's really been quite easy, and we're pretty excited to keep moving on. Okay, so the process. Really for us what we did, and I don't know how much you guys know NSX, so I'll just hit this real quick, but we pretty much set all of our rules to allow the traffic so we could just watch. We saw everything going through, could see what was happening. You build your basic rule sets for what you want to secure, and then like I said, you use Log Insight to watch all your incoming traffic and ports. Then what you do is you start to build more restrictive rules, and then you continue to monitor. You kind of lock things down, watch what's passing, see what stuff you just really don't need in there, and then you kind of start fine-tuning that. You start turning on those granular rules with deny, but then you still leave your top rule to basically still allow all your traffic. That's kind of like your final stop. Then when you get ready to make the final switch, you got all your change control in place, you've went before your change board, they're all thumbs up, even though they don't really realize what they're thumbs upping to. You basically then turn that last rule to deny. And then you really see that the proof is in the pudding, that you got your rules correct, because then at that point, only the things you've allowed in are allowing in. So it was really pretty much that simple. And what we did find we had a little issue. We just turn it right back off. I mean, it was just basically go up to the top again, turn it back on to allow, traffic started flowing, things were good. We went and found that little rule we needed to tweaked it, went back to turn it to deny, no calls, things were good. It was really that easy. So you build yourself from the bottom up like that, and it's really easy to turn it all off or back on if you need to. So let's talk about some of our lessons learned. So the myth, we nailed it, had 0 calls. No. That top rule thing to deny, so for whatever reason, our engineer didn't realize, he thought he'd set it to deny, but he didn't. He told us we went live, so we're running for like a week and a half, thinking everything is awesome. And then he kind of came to me sheepishly and went, I never set it to deny. It's like, oh. Because it was a big deal. The build team was freaking out because they thought they were going to be down. After I went live, they thought, this is awesome. There was no issue. So then we sheepishly turned it on, and we had just 1 or 2 calls. We cleaned it up, so it wasn't as bad as we thought. But be very aware of the rules you're setting. Be very aware when you set those. Test is exactly like prod. Test is never exactly like prod. So as much as you think you just roll the whole thing over, you still, as we did, prescriptively we just still went through the same process. We started at the bottom, started working our way up. We didn't just roll it over, turn it on, and hope it was good. We did have a few other ports that were just a little bit different, because for whatever reason, the cache guys wanted to change those a little bit. But as it be, pretty much the same process. And hey, we communicated our changes. We talked to the managing group, we talked to the leaders, we pushed it out to all those supervisors of all the build team. Everybody was aware, right? No. They all went basically, heard us, they wrote an email, hey, guess what, sent it out. We thought we were good to go, and next thing you know, we're talking to people, and that when we did have a few of those issues, they're freaking out, not understanding why things are happening, and we didn't take this planned downtime. So, I would encourage you, which is what we did when we went with full-on test, is that we went in, had a short conversation with them, got in front of them, had open communication. I would encourage you to do that because people just don't read their email or whatever they're in. Just telling you. So let's talk about ongoing. It has been really pretty straightforward. Pretty simple tasks and hasn't been difficult at all. So for us, communication of changes, and I'm talking specifically right here in terms of upgrades. So if you need to upgrade something, you need to take an SU, something like that, you got to be really ready so that SUs may possibly affect you. There's something that maybe a port they've changed at Epic. You need to be ready for that. If there's some kind of new addition you've made to MyChart or whatever it is, they keep, like Jeff said, they keep bringing in new stuff all the time. So the communication of new functionality, you have to be aware of that, especially your networking team. So they're watching those ports, and when they do an upgrade and they bring something new and all of a sudden stuff's blocked, it's not that much of a mystery. You start looking at what the traffic is and what's getting blocked, and you can really start to figure out what that is.
It becomes part of your lifecycle process, right?
It does.
Is that if this is the security model that you're planning on picking for your application, and this is regardless of whether it's Epic or if it's PAX or any other system within your environment, that your application teams understand that this is the type of security model that you have adopted within your organization, and that here are your rule sets that we have in place, and we need to challenge the application vendors to say, this is the model that we have adopted as an organization, and you need to adhere to that model. So if you deviate outside of these norms, we need to know about those things so that we can actually put those into place so that we don't run into problems.
Yeah, Jeff's spot on. So we've been an organization for many years. We forced Philips in their OB system, OB Traceview. It's now something different named, but we forced them to go virtual when they didn't want to. And we started talking to them about NSX, and their first response was, oh, not you guys again. So you really got to start coercing your vendors to realizing that this is the way that we as an organization do business, and we're not going to necessarily be bullied by how you maybe want to do business. And
Absolutely.
You'll see that in a minute. But so Jeff's spot on there. You still got to constantly review that log insight. That's actually how we found that our rule was set to allow versus deny, because the network engineer was like, I saw this traffic passing. And then he went to his rules like, oh. So you do really need to keep up on and just paying attention to those logs, looking for what you expect and don't expect. NSX upgrades, you really got to make sure you got a test environment, I would say. You're talking data flow across the environment now. You got to make sure, to be honest and to be fair, VMware's not perfect like any of us are, as much as we'd all like to be. So having a test environment that you can do upgrades with your NSX, making sure those things work well, really making sure your policy adds and changes are there with your change board, so making sure that those things are in place. So this is maybe the last part of what I'm going to talk about today is just organizational change. Let me tell you, and I don't know if your guys' environment is like mine, but I'm going to tell you right now, I should have a sticker that says, I love my network engineers, and yes, I came from the server world. It's been very interesting. This slide maybe depicts what our organization was like as soon as we started talking NSX. Let me tell you, anytime you start talking from the server world about how you're going to impact the network world, it was like shields up. I mean, it was, and then all of a sudden I had these conversations from my systems engineers, the network guys are saying they don't want to get involved, they feel like they're getting cut out already. We've just started talking. I mean, Jeff literally came on site for like a day. We had lunch and we talked about NSX, and you could see the network guys kind of scurry out and talking, and next thing you know, the word's traveling that we're going to take over the network again, and I was like, oh, come on, you guys. So after we kind of had many of these discussions, it kind of turned more into this. I mean, the network guys started realizing that this was really an extension of the plans they'd been wanting to do forever anyway. And we started helping them to realize that, look, you guys can have your seat at the table. As a matter of fact, we want you doing this work. We as the server engineers really don't want to be doing all this kind of new firewalling that's really going to be happening, this traffic monitoring and watching. We really want you to be part of what we are doing. Once we started getting them involved, as a matter of fact, when we did the POC, we pretty much told the network guys, by the way, you are at the front of the table, and then the ESX guys, the vSphere guys, they're at the back of the table. They're watching what you're doing, but really you guys are running the show on the POC. They were kind of like, what, really?
It was as I talk to my customers from how I run POCs and things like that, this is a whole different line of thinking, in that everyone in your organization has got to be involved. When we had that initial discussion with everybody on the POC, we had the Epic team in there, we had the network team, the server team, the VDI folks. Everybody was involved through the process. They understood what we were trying to accomplish, and while they didn't all need to be involved throughout the entire process, they were ready to come in and be educated on the things that we were doing and to help get to the end result. And I think that was that was the key, one of the good keys to making sure that we were successful the first time, did the first part very, very fast.
If you want to fail at this project, create this as a siloed project. I'm just going to tell you that right now, because Jeff's right. I mean, it was all about leadership at this point. It was about helping people understand that they were part of it and not necessarily just the VMware guys are doing their thing. I mean, trust me, we have the Cisco versus the VMware talks, and it's, I keep reminding them, it's not Cisco versus anybody. I mean, we can't live without the network, and you guys have your part to play. So if you really want to be successful, like Jeff said, we brought in the Epic team. We wanted them to hear what we were doing. We brought in the Epic system. We even brought in our TAs and things like that from Epic and TSs so they could hear what our plans were, so they didn't think we were doing anything rogue.
Yep.
They were all over it. They loved it. So by all means, get everybody involved. Everybody, including the security team, because this is how we feel, right? Even the security and the server guys can all agree that, whoa, that's the security team again. The security team was all over, like, wanting to know all the things and all the data and all the, what are all the policies after, this thing's set up. That's great, okay. And I think it was Bill who came out, and
Yeah.
Bill had to sit with our security guys after we were all done and sit there, and they basically had to reassure him once again of all the things that were happening and all the policies. And can we get this in our SIM? Are you sure we can get this in our SIM? And, and what is NSX going to think of all this? It was funny, but anyway. So security network or server network, we could agree that the security team is always on the edge, but that's all right. That's their job. So everybody does have their needs, right? So like I said, we had to create the policies and the rules. That was networking. That's their needs. They needed to make sure that they were still holding on to those things. Now, whether you guys decide to do that in your organization or not, we felt that was valuable for them, kept them engaged in it, kept them realizing that this was their network again. Really, VM to VM traffic visibility, I threw that out as a reminder of a carrot for them. They would always come to us and say, look, we pretty much have to stop at the edge of your VMware environment because we can't really tell you when we have to troubleshoot what's going on downstream into those VMs. I'm like, well, look at this. Once I started seeing what they could see, they were blown away. I mean, to them, it was a new opportunity. Virtual distributed switch gave them some of those things where they could monitor ports. But the log insight and being able to see through NSX, that just really upped the ante for them. They were totally on board when they could see those things. Felt like they gave them a whole new set of glasses to see into a network for so many years that they felt like they couldn't. So they were super happy about that. As kind of noted again, visibility from outside in with the VM guests and hosts, that was pretty great. Security team, same thing. They just wanted to know, the server team. For us, we just wanted to keep building servers. We didn't want to have some new weird policy that we necessarily had to go through. We didn't have to wait for the network team to do this and that and that. If you looked at like the V1000, that was kind of one of those big issues in the day. Well, this was really straightforward for us. This was pretty much great. We got a new policy. It was just kind of like setting a VLAN instead. It was super easy. The guys are just moving forward with it. Pretty much didn't change how they do their servers at all. And for them, they wanted to also know, because we're the first people who usually get called when there's a problem with connectivity, was, okay, we want to make sure that we can see everything and the policies that are there. So if we could see that, oh, look at that, port 443 is blocked here, we can just see it. So that was an easy win there. Security, again, their thing, they just wanted visibility and validation. They wanted to make sure they were getting logs, which is like a standard answer for them. Organizational change, like I said, new systems, you've got to make sure that you go through what I call the NSX learning process. You got to take these new systems before they ever get into the wild, make sure you can run them through, see what they're doing, analyze that traffic so you can get them done before they go into production. East and west traffic, it's no longer guaranteed. I think so many of our analysts, they think, oh, I can just communicate from this server to that, and we're starting to take that away. So we need to help them to realize that organizational shift, that east and west traffic is kind of a thing of the past. Creating governance around, what kind of systems can be grouped and communicate and how they should talk. Ongoing strategic network design. And like I put here, I had coerce. Okay, we'll go with encourage. But you really got to be forceful with your vendors. A lot of them are starting to catch on. A lot of them also haven't even heard of NSX. They have no idea. They're all about open shares and things like that. So those are things that are kind of becoming things of the past. Technology, so innovatively, we got to integrate our automated process with, and that was supposed to be NSX. I forgot that word apparently. Integrate with these different partners from the network side, and then we just got to be cognizant there's one more layer of possible interruption in our core business solutions out there. I'm not saying that NSX is a barrier, I'm just saying it's just one more thing that you got to be paying attention to. So basically the three things I want to just kind of leave you with, NSX is definitely that dynamic security solution. Not just from the standpoint that it's virtual, but from the standpoint that you can automate a lot of things. It's easy to do these dynamic rules. It's very slick. I would tell you if you're going to get started with NSX like we did, start with something very strategic and narrow in your implementation so you can get your feet wet. You can understand the animal you're taking on, but realize that it's pretty easy. If you bring in PSO, which I'm going to tell you should, they'll help you immensely. And from the cost standpoint, I'm a guy who doesn't like to do a lot of PSO, and I thought this was pretty affordable, really. So I would make sure that you're definitely doing that. And then your organizational adoption. I talked a lot about that. Make sure you get everybody on board. Make sure that people are understanding what the change of microsegmentation is going to mean to them. Help them get to be like they are part of the process and engage them. And I think you'll definitely be successful. I can't tell you to fill out your survey. Oh, there we go. So, I don't know if you need that. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you very much. If anybody has any questions, I know we're at time. So if anybody has any questions, I'm able to hang around and answer questions.
I can stick around for a little bit too.
But we want to thank everyone for hanging in there on day 4 and coming out and listening. Hope it was informative and you got some great information out of it. You got a question, Dave?
In a nutshell, Jason, is there anything you would have done differently had you were implementing NSX into a production Epic environment?
So the question is, would we have done anything different if we were implementing in a production Epic environment? I think we would have obviously flipped them. We would have went test now or some other environment. With Epic, you've got so many different environments you can play in. So we would have done that. But I think what we would have also done is tried to get the next version of Epic we were going to and probably start with that so we could, like going to Epic 2018, we probably got that in-house and started playing with those first iterations as you go through those first environments, see what they look like. That way when we got to prod, we could probably flip a lot easier. Great question. Thank you. Anybody else?
Did you do just microsegmentation, or did you do virtual networking and stuff like that?
Question is, did we just do microsegmentation or also virtual networking? You ready for? Right. You ready for this, Jeff? What did we do? I know we did microsegmentation.
They just did the microsegmentation.
I thought that's what we did.
Yeah. So the one thing that one folks to understand is that the microsegmentation piece does not require network virtualization. That is something I think that folks have been a little confused on, is that microsegmentation with NSX does not require VXLAN. It does not require a change in your network to do any of these things. This is the reason why we're able to come in and do and do a POC on microsegmentation in a couple of hours. To ask you to do network virtualization would require you to change an MTU on your network, which requires change of controls, significant amounts of work, et cetera, et cetera. You have to make sure your full paths and everything are all configured, right? There's nothing I could do. I can't do network virtualization without a customer doing a lot of prep on the network side of the house within a couple of hours. That's just not possible.
Yeah, and to that point, now that talking VXLAN and all that kind of good stuff. As a matter of fact, our Cisco guys, they were hot and heavy on the ACI track, and they are still interested. But let me tell you, after this, it's been less of a conversation because they know how much ACI is going to take. And so much of our environment is virtualized now, they're like, wow, we just bit off a whole bunch of this in one little tiny bite with.
How virtualized are you now? Like 96%?
96%.
96%.
So, I mean, for ACI, obviously there's elements to that are valuable, but they're already banging their head over ACI, and they were like, oh, we did this in like 2 weeks. So.
Yeah.
Did you do any rules for third parties? Third party that comes along with that pick?
So we have done some, I believe, with OnBase. There was some third-party rules we did with OnBase. Rhapsody, there's some of those rules in there for Rhapsody. So yeah, definitely some of those fingerlings that come off of the project, we definitely included those, and we're going to be including more. So, yep. Great question. Yes? So the question is, did we give our network engineer access to vCenter and everything? So we did. As a matter of fact, we let them have access to it. Did they necessarily need access? No, they don't. It was kind of more of a little bargaining chip so they could see into it, but you wouldn't have to give them access, just like kind of vice versa, to be honest. But yeah, they do have access. They have read-only access. Does that help? So great question. And if you have questions, come up with the mic if you would. Sorry. But these are all great questions. I love them.
Yeah.
You said one of the questions your security team had was SIEM integration. Which one were they using?
So we use QRadar as our SIM. Yep.
Does it work with Splunk?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Cool. And there was any problems with the vulnerability scanning?
With the vulnerability scanning? So there is, so the log information that we're pulling from the distributed firewall, that information is what we're displaying as Splunk, right? So there's not vulnerability scanning and so forth would be however the Splunk handles the vulnerability side of that thing. But NSX isn't necessarily going to impede any of that unless there is a specific port that is going to scan across. Then you would need to open up that port and allow that system to actually do that vulnerability scanning. Sure, you would need to do that.
So it'd just be rules that would.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah, absolutely. So there's to steal something from an Apple, there's an app for that. right? There actually is an NSX for Splunk plugin application that you can actually, provide the log information over to it to actually create a dashboard for it.
Thank you.
Cool.
And we did have to do that, by the way. There was a port that Nessus wanted that we had to tweak a little bit. So.
Did you have another question, Dave?
It's just more about the third-party integration. Was there any specific challenges with microsegmenting, like Active Directory, antivirus, system management, stuff like that?
So question is more microsegmentation with more of your utility stuff, like your antiviruses, your Active Directory, things like that. Not really. I mean, I think, because obviously with hyperspace and all those kind of things and some of the tool sets, you've got AD. I think we just allowed those 686s and...
Sure. So the screenshot that I showed you in terms of the different sections of the application, right? I have included in the blueprint a shared services or an infrastructure-based services like area for you to, and I took some basic things, right? I took KMS, LDAP, NTP, DNS, those types of things, and I placed those things in there. I think when we went through and did the POC, and we went through and actually started going through and actually applying some of the rule sets in, they were using SCCM and SCOM, and there were some other things, right, that we found that were outside of the things that we found. So those are the types of things that we can't necessarily build the blueprint for, because not everyone's using SCOM, not everyone's using SCCM, those types of things. But if you're an Epic environment, it's 99% Windows-based system, so there's going to be some form of Active Directory. So tried to use a little common sense to add the common sense things in there, but we're always going to miss a few things, right? So it's really to get customers to start thinking that microsegmentation is not just the app, right? There are ancillary systems, infrastructure-based systems that the application depends on that need to be taken into consideration too, right?
Yeah, and I would just follow that up by saying those were the things in the 2 weeks when the PSO engagement was on that the consultant helped us, the engineer. I mean, pretty much our network engineer was the guy driving, and he was looking at vlog site, and it was like, oh, hey, I didn't even realize. So we use Avanti, which used to be called Heat, as our antivirus program. He's like, wow, and patching. I was like, I didn't even realize it passed traffic from there to there. And so we were learning things about this that we didn't even realize, but we did use those utilities, and we did have to set some of those rules in what you're saying, those shared services. So, yep, those were part of it too. So you guys are helping me remember things I forgot about.
Now you're saying you're using the log inside. What about the VRNI? You did that as well?
We did.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've been out to see where you guys are at in terms of using VRNI.
So the question is VRNI, which vRealize Network
Insight.
Yep. So what I was just told by the team the other day is, as a matter of fact, Log Insight is more intuitive in terms of using it for NSX policies.
Okay.
Because it's more of the real time, where the log or the network Log Insight is more of a picture. It doesn't bring you real-time data necessarily, but it helps you to really analyze your network and see where things are at and builds a better picture. So they're like, yeah, it's great. We love it, and it gives us all this visibility we didn't have, but Log Insight really helped us for watching those ports fly by.
Yeah, you could create alarms in either one of the different pieces, right? But Log Insight is definitely going to show you traffic like as it's happening, like that second. Network Insight does things on polling intervals. It's if Sean O'Dell were up here, he would say it's near real time, and it's about a 5-minute interval that is bringing information in. But if you're troubleshooting an issue like right that second, it's probably not the first tool that you would go through to do the troubleshooting process. But it's there. And in things like 3.5, VRNI 3.5, we've brought in a lot of information that you were getting out of Log Insight that wasn't presented in Network Insight for drop flows and things like that. So you can actually get alarms and alerts on those things too. So there's been significant changes, I think, in a lot of those products.
Yeah, they're loving VRNI just because of the end-to-end look at from a system to system. They can see what's in the path of everything, and my server guys are just drooling over it and loving it. So that was a great purchase along with it too. Cool. Yes, sir.
You said you're using Horizon. Did you include that?
Good question. So the question is, are we using Horizon View with NSX? Not yet, but it is. I would say it's probably the next thing. The reason being is that we're tired of all the east-west traffic from our desktops, because that's really where a lot of these virus issues and malware stuff comes by. So really, we're looking to push and do NSX with Horizon View. So to be continued. Maybe that's what I'm going to talk about next year. But yeah, it's something that's like on the forefront of our roadmap, but not yet.
How you present hyperspace is still something you have to take into consideration, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you're doing it through Horizon, whether you're doing it through RDSH, XenApp,
Citrix, whatever.
Citrix, yeah.
Yep.
So while there might not be direct, like while Jason and the team might not be doing directly with the VDI piece, the presentation, the Epic blueprint does take into consideration how hyperspace is presented to the customer. And we can actually place whatever system that you're using within that group to allow communications from those systems directly to the hyperspace servers, right? The hyperspace web servers. So that you're still controlling how you connect to hyperspace web and who has access.
Yeah, I understand that, but
Yeah.
I agree with him. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, the biggest entry point of malware is
Yeah.
from the
From the desktop.
Absolutely.
Yep. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Cool.
These are great questions. Thanks, you guys. Anything else? Well, hey, thank you very much. I haven't got Twitter yet, but my email's out there. So if you ever have any questions, I'd love to connect with you guys. So thank you so very much. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
We really appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks, Ben.